And joining me now is Lawrence Sprung, founder and lead wealth advisor at Midland Financial. Now, we know JP Morgan Chase acquired First Republic's deposits and assets. Now, what I'm wondering is, what about its liabilities? Who's acquiring those?
My understanding is at this point in time that JP Morgan is purchasing the entirety. So I believe they're going to be making them whole and taking on the full First Republic entity.
Now, do you see this as a banking crisis? I know that word is floated around a lot, but do you see it as that?
I do not. I think that we had a bit of a perfect storm in terms of, Silicon Valley Bank from a couple of weeks ago. There was some, similarities between First Republic and Silicon Valley Bank. So I think it's just more of the same. And I think that we have the majority of this behind us at this point in time. With that being said, it's still concerning to people out there, and there are still steps that they should be thinking about. They should have been thinking about it a few weeks ago after Silicon Valley Bank. And if they didn't at that point, now definitely it's something that they should be considering and talking to their banks about.
I mean, First Republic has been seeing a lot of trouble the past few weeks following Silicon Valley Bank's collapse. Now, was this surprising to you, or maybe perhaps you saw this coming?
Listen, I think it was almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy to some degree, right? When you put out there in the public that you have a financial institution that may be having trouble, think about it, Don. If you're a depositor there, right, what are you thinking? Why should I be banking there? I can move my deposits somewhere else and have them safe. So when you have that kind of information put out there, it's almost self-fulfilling. So you have a bit of a run on the bank. You have people withdrawing deposits, which just puts them in even a worse position than they were beforehand. So it was not surprising in the least. Last week, we had several conversations with people that we knew that had deposits there. And really our view was that if they made it to Friday last week, the likelihood of them making it to today was pretty low.
I mean, the sentiment around this, the sentiment, is it worse than they should be? I mean, if we look at the data, if we look at the facts, is it that bad? Are the sentiments worse than they should be?
I think they are worse than they should be, because in the end, when all is said and done, everybody, whether it was First Republic or even previous to that Silicon Valley Bank, everybody was made whole. So there was nobody that suffered as a result of what happened with these financial institutions. But with that being said, we don't know, if there's a next one, right? Because I think what gets overlooked sometimes, and these Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic were put under a microscope because of their size. But the reality is there are banks that do go out of business fairly regularly on an annualized basis. We don't hear from them because we don't hear about them because a lot of times they're smaller, more regionalized, but it does happen. So I think the big takeaway for me and for those who are depositors at any financial institution is know what level of insurance, what level of coverage, what level of safety that you have with that financial institution. That is crucial to making sure that your liquid monies, your financial situation is safe and sound.
Does this benefit JP Morgan at all?
Well, I'm sure it does, because from my understanding, First Republic had a pretty solid business. They had an excellent clientele. So now these clients and these customers are now on, basically JP Morgan clients. So ultimately, they are benefiting from it. And I think one thing that's pretty clear that we've seen from Silicon Valley Bank and now First Republic is we're creating a situation that the big banks are getting bigger, that there is a level of haves and have-nots, because the reality is there are a number of financial institutions obviously out there, but there weren't many that were of the size and scope that would have had the ability to take on these financial institutions that had troubles the last few weeks. So there are definitely some benefits there.
Do you have any concerns that JP Morgan may be getting even bigger? You mentioned that just now.
Listen, I think that you have those concerns for, there are a few big banks that represent the lion's share of the deposits in this country. And, that certainly is concerning. You're entering an area where, you have certain banks that at this point may be too big to fail. But at the same time, I think FDIC and the government regulators, by how they stepped in and facilitated both Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic, to some degree are giving off the message that even smaller banks are too big to fail. So, we're sending a little bit of a confusing message out there. The bottom line is, I think it's of utmost importance for the public to at least know and acknowledge what their level of safety is. So there are those concerns out there for sure, but you don't want to have deposits at the next bank that fails and then it's not treated in the same way, which, could essentially happen. We don't know. It's not a guarantee, aside from FDIC, that the regulators would step in and facilitate a sale like we've seen over the last couple of weeks.
Right, and that leads to my next question. I want to touch a little bit on the Fed. We're going to have the meeting in the next few days. 25 basis points likely baked in the cake at this point. So the focus for some will likely be around the rhetoric that Jay Powell provides during his speech. And I want to ask you, in light of what happened today, how is that going to impact this rhetoric?
Yeah, I don't feel that it's going to change much at all. I think it might be a different story if First Republic was let to collapse, or there wasn't a suitor, or FDIC didn't come in and take over, the regulators didn't come on and take over the bank. I think that would have had a significant change. I think to your point, it's pretty much baked in there. We're going to see a 25 basis point hike in the coming days. But at the same time, I think he'll acknowledge what happened, but I don't know that it really, is going to impact the policy going forward.
I see. Well, time will tell. Thank you so much today, Lawrence. Pleasure having you on.
Don, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here.